Well, Graham Taylor retains vivid memories of those nervy moments in Naples when he was nothing much more than an England fan, really. But he's making no concessions for the past. This match vital in his learning process about his players. It's a big night for David Seaman, of course, starting a Wembley International for the first time. For Trevor Stevens stepping back into the limelight on the right of midfield. And for Ian Wright, rewarded for an excellent performance for England's B team in December. For 7 of the Cameroon side played against England in the Italian World Cup extravaganza. 3 more, Onana, Omam-Biyik and Umbu would have played but for suspension. That just leaves the goalkeeper, Antoine Bell, who was the first choice until 6 hours before the opening game for Cameroon, when he was dropped for disciplinary reasons and replaced by Thomas Nkono, who then played in every game. No Chris Waddle amongst the England 5 substitutes. And for Cameroon, as we've told you already, no Roger Milla, who has explained to us that it's not to do with money. You perhaps have read that he asked for a personal reward for playing in this game, which was understandably turned down by the Football Association. Milla says he is not participating on a point of principle. He does stress that it's not a financial point of principle. Make of that what you will. Referee is John Blankenstein, who comes from Holland. First touch in a full international is about to take place to get the game underway alongside Gary Lineker. England attacking the goal to the right in the first half against the indomitable Lions of Cameroon, who charmed us so in the World Cup, but are also fierce and determined competitors. Lineker, steered back by Kundé. Whoever England play against under Graham Taylor, the message is always to move the ball quickly. But tonight it seems particularly appropriate. Cameroon honoured to be invited to play at Wembley, but I'm sure they would have preferred different circumstances.
Yes, I feel the word honour is the appropriate word, and I was quite disgusted by the action of Roger Milla. I know he said that it had nothing to do with money, but I would have thought that to play... I'll just leave it there for a second.
Lineker takes it up. England force a corner. Trevor.
No, I was thinking that to actually play on one of the best stadiums in world football, Roger Milla should be offering the English FA money, not the other way round.
Gascoigne, remember, was dropped in Dublin, but he takes this corner on his return. Kundé deals with it. Stuart Pearce is round the back. Brian Robson right in there typically. And the ball has run behind for another corner. It's a deep ball from Stephen, and Bell claims it. Befitting a man who earns his living in the French First Division with Bordeaux, claimed it with real authority. Ebwele. Kundé. Well, I think the players are in the best position tonight. They'll be able to move about and keep warm. My admiration for the spectators, who have, of course, probably weeks ago invested in their tickets for this international, which seemed an inspired choice by the Football Association, who couldn't have predicted the coldest spell for perhaps several years. Tator doing the dispossessing, but not for long. Pagal doing a little bit of calming there. Here's Pearce. Ian Wright, who's direct and exciting and hasn't had much chance to work with Gary Lineker. Gascoigne's corner, and Bell there again. He's made a terrific start to the game. Flick by Omam-Biyik. Ebwele, the number 5. Omam-Biyik, the number 7. Mark Wright, England with a change in their tactical approach defensively, with a line of 4 defenders across the pitch rather than the 3 centre-backs that they've been playing with recently. John Barnes, Pearce, who's being encouraged by Graham Taylor to just go out in international football and play as he does with such swaggering effect for Nottingham Forest. And if Pearce goes forward, it does allow Barnes to move infield a little, as he often does so effectively for Liverpool. Lineker hoping for a flick on, but England have worked the corner short. Pearce gets the cross in, Robson! And it was an instinctive stop by Bell to knock the ball down, and then he was able to claim it. Brian Robson might not have the whole match tonight to encourage Graham Taylor to feature him in his future plans, so he's very much a man in a hurry, Trevor.
Yes, I'm sure that's a taste of things to come. That's England's 4th corner in these opening few minutes. And I like the look of this England team tonight. It looks a very solid lineup, plenty of inventiveness in midfield with Gascoigne and Robson, and plenty of pace and goal-scoring power up front with Ian Wright and Gary Lineker. I'd be very disappointed if this England team don't win convincingly tonight.
Gascoigne. Right. It's certainly in Graham Taylor's thinking to try and get Gascoigne to play more of his football in the opposition's half. Walker. Robson won't get to this. Omam-Biyik, another who earns his living in France. Ebwele, a mixture of full-timers and part-timers. Cameroon, I'm sure you've appreciated by now that they're wearing their World Cup numbers to add to the feeling of nostalgia here. Pagal. Kator getting in the cross. Gascoigne. Easy for Ebwele. And Umbu, who was a real loss for Cameroon when they met England. He's the heartbeat of their midfield, a tireless player. Ebwele. 8 minutes, remember. Cameroon came from knocking England out of the World Cup and giving Africa a representative in the semi-finals. Barnes. Cut off by Kundé.
Yes, you're right, Martin. I was there that night in Naples when England came so close to going out the quarter-finals of the World Cup. And I have to say that if it wasn't for the naivety of some of the Cameroon defenders, I think that England would have been knocked out.
Yes, it's the defending that they've been talking about since they've been here. But they do feel that they are naive, that they don't tackle much in their own country. And that sort of body checking was a familiar sight in the World Cup. It was a nana here on Trevor Steven. They put it down to the bad pitches that they play on in Cameroon, which is not conducive to tackling technique.
No, you see Trevor Steven here, it just knocks it round the player and, well, he's just blatantly body checked there. That is the sinister side of Cameroon football that we don't like to see here tonight, but we saw so often during the World Cup. It's worth remembering that in the 5 games that the Cameroon played, they had 2 players sent off and 13 bookings. And I have to say that along with Argentina, for me they're the dirtiest team in the World Cup.
Cameroon have set a wall, although the free kick is, 35 yards. Mark Wright is well up here. Pierce, Lineker is unmarked. Not handball, despite Lineker's vigorous appeal. But that uncertainty in their defending, undoubtedly the weakest part of the Cameroon game. But for the goalkeeper Bell here is surfacing again in the opening 9 minutes at Wembley. Lineker. Gascoigne. Here's Wright. He's done very well indeed, has Ian Wright, to get past the first man, Onana. Cameroon at the moment finding it awkward to get out of their own half. Barnes.
Well, I feel that Cameroon were a little bit fortunate to escape there, because as Gary Lineker played the ball around Cameroon defender Biyik, he clearly handled the ball, and I'm sure that was a definite penalty.
Stephen. Wright. Robson's made a great forward run. He wasn't picked up by the defender, but he wasn't spotted by Mark Wright, who's got to pick himself up from the toils of performing for Derby County at the bottom of the First Division. Ian Wright. Barnes. It's mostly attack down the left for England at the moment. Gascoigne. Pierce maybe can line one up. Wanted to take it further forward than Cameroon were prepared to allow him. Mark Wright's header. Here's Mbu. Fede. Now Omam-Biyik, who was the first player sent off in the World Cup in Milan against Argentina, when Cameroon scored against 11 when they were playing with 10 men, ended up with 9 and still won the match, and really put themselves in the marketable position that they find themselves in at the moment. Not just for Cameroon, but also for African football, who have already been rewarded with one extra place in the next World Cup qualification system. David Seaman, who's performed with such a presence in the Arsenal goal this season, challenging Chris Woods. Gascoigne. Here's Pierce. Both sides were incidentally scheduled to have training sessions this morning. You won't be surprised to learn that they both cancelled them, which meant that Cameroon couldn't rehearse their set pieces, so we'll wait and see what happens if they get a corner. Gascoigne, policed by Pagal, tripped by Pagal. Quick free kick. Pierce Gascoigne suddenly finding the need to concentrate again. And Pagal persistent. Paul Gascoigne's memories of playing against Cameroon include conceding a penalty when he brought down Roger Milla. Gascoigne takes the free kick, trying to find Robson, who was stopped by Onana. But there's no way out for Cameroon at the moment. They're keeping everyone tucked in behind the ball. That's not dissimilar from the way they set out in their World Cup matches. First half organisation and resilience often built the platform for Milla's entrance in the second half. Pearce came quickly to Trevor Stephen, but it was a lovely first touch. Lee Dixon. Bell's come a long way again, and a suspicion of a fumble, but only just that. And he really is commanding his penalty area, Trevor.
Yes, it's worth the England players keep an eye on Bell, because here you see Dixon crossing the ball and you just can't see it, but Bell is already 3 or 4 yards off his goal line before the cross has come over. I remember Beardsley in the last game he played here caught the goalkeeper napping by beating him at the near post. And it's worth the England players keeping a little sharp eye out for this, because he is coming off his line too far.
Well, the Bell style has been very much likened to Bruce Grobbelaar, and I think you've been able to see that already. The last goal he conceded, incidentally, for his club Bordeaux was put past him last Friday night by Chris Waddle, which wasn't a very good omen for coming to take on the might of England. Tator, who had a trial in October with Queen's Park Rangers, but they decided not to pursue their interest, much to Tator's disappointment, who felt he'd done well in his time under Don Howe. Well, it's Ian Wright on the receiving end this time from Onana.
I think it just caught Ian right there across the ankle, but it is quite noticeable that England are playing with a lot more freedom tonight than normal. I know that Graham Taylor is a great believer that you must have a lot of movement in your team. I feel that over the years England are a bit too stereotyped, and tonight we're seeing Trevor Stephen not playing as we expect him to be on the right of midfield. He's playing more as he does for Glasgow Rangers in a central midfield role. We've also got Stuart Pearce getting forward on the left as often as possible.
Gascoigne teasing Pagal this time. England will want the ball to be released successfully though. Mark Wright getting it stuck under his feet. Walker. And the game has settled to a pattern now. Dixon. England setting the tempo. Cameroon concentrating on just keeping them out. But here's Barnes.
Just returning for a moment about Stuart Pearce. In previous England games, he's been accustomed to playing in a forward attacking role, because England have always played with 3 defenders, allowing himself on one flank and Dixon on the other to push forward whenever possible. But tonight they're only playing with 4, but it is noticeable that Stuart Pearce at times is playing ahead with advance of John Barnes. But he has to be careful, because Pagal is also playing in that area.
Stephen in quickly. And he's got to it again. Trevor Stevens' last goal for England was England's first against an African nation back in 1986 in Egypt. Well, he does have a very sharp footballing brain. Kundé. Here's Platt. Now Ekeke, one of the two scorers against England. Kundé, who got the penalty, is operating really as the free man at the back in this Cameroon lineup. He's throwing number 6. And Ekeke, who is a striker, having to carry his share of the defensive burden at the moment. Right, Ian Wright, that is. On the left of the picture is Philippe Redon, who is in charge of Cameroon for the first time tonight. He's a Frenchman. Steven did that wonderfully well. Right, Lineker. Goalkeeper Bell brought Lineker down. Penalty. It's the same problem for Cameroon that they had in the World Cup quarter-final. Gary Lineker earned 2 penalties for England then and scored them both. And thanks to Ian Wright's knockdown to him here and Bell's lunge there, Lineker will have the ball on the penalty spot again. In his pursuit of England's all-time scoring record. Lineker takes it, Lineker scores! 20 minutes gone. Straight down the slot really, as Bell anticipated a shot to his right. And for Lineker, his England tally keeps on rising to 38 now.
Well, it was certainly no surprise to see the referee award a penalty, because they were fortunate before when Biyik handled in the penalty box. Some of the tackling's a bit reckless, and I think England can go on now to score a few more. And that may not be the last of penalties tonight, because whenever the ball's in the box, Lineker and Wright are causing plenty of problems, and the tackling is a little bit reckless.
About Gary Lineker and about Brian Robson, whose target is 100 caps, playing for the 88th time tonight. And Graham Taylor will be able to harness that ambition, I'm sure, to the collective good for England. Well, it is amazing that England have gone 52 internationals without a penalty until they played Cameroon. And if they play Cameroon as often as this, we'll be keeping a different kind of tally. Lineker has a 100% record from the penalty spot for his country. Gascoigne with the free kick. Right. That was Lineker. Here's Stephen. What the goal has meant, of course, is that if Cameroon have any ambition to avoid defeat here, which I'm sure they do have, they must change their policy, which was certainly one of containment over the 20 minutes before the penalty. Gascoigne. Gascoigne again. Wright. Gascoigne's got it back. Ian Wright's got it back. Not quite. But there was a slick interchange there.
Yes, the England players are finding plenty of space. Good movement, good passing. There's plenty more goals to come in this game.
Oh, and Bell had to get to that because it was veering in, one would have suspected, from the corner by Stuart Pearce.
Yes, as the ball is played into the near post there, Bell is not put under any pressure at all. There should have been a challenge on him.
Barnes. The pitch still playing well, thanks to the protection put on it by the Wembley ground staff. No undersoil heating though, remember, which is surely something that Wembley should address. Across after there's Walker. It's shown, I think, that it's not totally frozen underfoot. Oh, and Bell very nearly caught out, just as Trevor Francis had predicted, by Ian Wright. The goalkeeper who wants to anticipate a cross and leaves a gap like this.
Well, I'm not sure if it was meant by Ian Wright, but if it was good intelligent play. But that is on all the time. Just 5 minutes prior to that, you saw Trevor Stephen breaking through the box, through the edge of the box, and he tried the little chip because he noticed Bell was off his line. It's on if the players are aware of it.
Yes, our camera on the reverse side of the ground, on the far side, suggested that it might have slewed a little off the left foot of Ian Wright, but it very nearly embarrassed Antoine Bell. Gascoigne. Pearce. Wright getting very involved, and that's a measure of his confidence, overconfidence on that occasion. And of course he's very happy memories of Wembley and his FA Cup final appearance. Pagal and Fede. And Fede was another player who took part in all the 5 games in the World Cup for Cameroon. Lineker, well defended by Tato.
Great running off the ball once again there from Gary Lineker. It was a super pass from Brian Robson to find him. Thought Gary could have been a little bit more selfish there. He tried to play the ball across for Ian Wright, but really could have had a shot himself.
Stephen. For once Wright and Lineker going to the same area. They've split now. Ombu is almost putting Omam-Biyik into trouble. And Fede. Kundé did well in what is probably going to be his farewell international. He's actually announced his retirement from the Cameroon national squad, but this is something of a festival fixture from their point of view, without the weather to match. Lineker's offside. Well, Andy Gray, watching from the warmth of the studio, your impressions of the first part of the first half?
Well, I can only assume that the England players must be absolutely enjoying themselves, Martin. Cameroon team don't look at all happy. And England, I think, have surprised them with the pace that they started the game at. They started at a typical English type of pace, and they've really got at Cameroon and caused them tremendous problems. I think it was noticeable early on that Trevor Steven was causing a little bit of problem by not playing wide right. Noticeable again that as soon as he did, his cross comes in, first one, and England get the penalty in the goal. And I tend to agree with Trevor that if England really want to, they can go and make Cameroon suffer tonight.
But of course, in Naples, England scored first and then found themselves 2-1 down. And Cameroon trying to have really their first say in attack, and they can do a lot better than that. Omam-Biyik. Philippe Redon, he's clearly a rather distressed coach at the moment. I think he owes his appointment to the fact that he played with a number of the senior Cameroon players in French football, including Roger Milla. Barnes, emphasising the free-flowing approach that England are adopting here, but they have to chase back in numbers. Umbrella. Umbu. Here's Omam-Biyik. Ekeke going ahead of him, taking Des Walker with him. Tator. Only Umfede in the centre, and Mark Wright makes sure that the ball doesn't reach him. Umbu. Omam-Biyik with Emmanuel. And now Umfede. Blocked by Dixon. Well, he's still there. Umfede needs some help, but he was trying to get beyond Lee Dixon, who by his own admission hasn't been on absolutely top of his game for Arsenal in recent matches. Again, Trevor Steven out-thinking the opposition. Onana. Pierce up well. Barnes trying to get there before Pagal. Two up for England. Two very mobile attackers too. Omam-Biyik. Umfede. It's given away by Onana to John Barnes. England have three to his right, but Barnes looks for goal, and more evidence that it's going to be a very busy night for Antoine Bell.
Good individual skill here from John Barnes. Goes past the first player, then comes to the second, decides not to go past him, but gets it onto his right foot and curls a little ball across the goal, but not enough curl on it. But it's good to see John Barnes in such positive attitude tonight.
Kundé. The same applies to Trevor Steven. Wright fires it across. Omam-Biyik can do little more than just get to the ball first. As Cameroon again find themselves pressed into their own penalty area. Kundé got his head to it. Hit back by Dixon, who's been a consistent figure in Graham Taylor's short reign. There were perhaps a number in the centre who would have preferred the cross.
Yes, I'm sure one player would have preferred was Brian Robson. His look on his face when Dixon tried the shot was one of the disappointment. He found himself in plenty of space and he was looking for the ball into the box.
Pearce. Now Barnes, who got the boat over Chris Waddle for this particular job in the side, and Graham Taylor making the point that he didn't see under his management that England would play with Barnes and Waddle in the same team as wingers, as they were used by Bobby Robson, so that he did see John Barnes as a potential forward, which would give Waddle a chance, obviously, to get back into the team.
Just taking you up on that point, Martin. Although I wasn't surprised that Chris Waddle was in the starting line, I was surprised he wasn't on the bench.
I think he might be surprised as well. Pearce. Robson homing in behind Lineker. And Lineker has got a surprising amount of freedom. Is it going to be another penalty? Not this time.
As Gary comes into the penalty box, it's certainly had all the making of a penalty, but I think on this occasion it was Kundé with a rather reckless challenge, but I don't think on that occasion it was a penalty. I feel that Gary Lineker had just overran the ball.
Gascoigne. Taken from him by Kundé. Umbu. England very much using this match to get back into the swing of international football after 3 months that have really hung heavy for Graham Taylor. First time he's experienced it really, mid-season, when of course he's so used to the day-to-day involvement in club management. Apart from maybe a few Cameroon fans in the ground, David Seaman might also appreciate a little bit more action at the left-hand end as we look. His hands will be as cold as the spectators, I think. So much of the game has been played at the other end. It'll be a test of his concentration as much as of his agility. Eight minutes to go to half-time. England lead by 1-0. Scored from the penalty spot by Gary Lineker. Tator. Steered out by Robson. Kundé taking a bit of a chance, but Cameroon need to do that. And Pagal, who's perhaps been one of the more active attack-minded players coming from midfield, was on the same wavelength as Kundé then, but had gone offside.
I would think for Paul Gascoigne this game can come quickly enough after being left out over in Dublin, but I've been a bit disappointed in this opening period with Paul, because I feel at times that he's just trying to do too much on the ball. He's trying to impress so much, he's getting caught in possession. He's got to start playing a little bit easier, playing the simple ball. There once again, playing the difficult ball, when the simpler ball would have been much easier for him. He's trying to impress, but really it'd be better playing it easier.
England run it back with a thumping Pearce tackle. Barnes, and now Robson. Brian Robson happy with his match fitness after that dreadful Achilles injury, but still believing that his touch for the ball needs a little more improvement. Started 9 games for Manchester United since regaining fitness, and of course has played for England B in Algeria in December when he played at the back. Keke a little slow to picking himself up, but Cameroon have the full complement as they go forward, but not the full conviction.
You mentioned, Martin, that Brian Robson was only going to play the first half. A Graham Taylor decision, that, but I'm just wondering if he'll ever change of thought, because it hasn't been a particularly demanding first 45 minutes of Brian. He may just consider leaving him on for a few more minutes in the second half.
I know you're a good friend of Brian's, and you're speaking up for him well. Stephen. Pierce. Barnes. Brought down conclusively by Omam-Biyik, who was hurt in the foul, and the Dutch referee not making it fully clear that the game had been brought to a halt. Omam-Biyik, who's as protected as he can be against the cold with the gloves and the cycling shorts.
I mentioned that Paul Gascoigne was one player who's trying to impress here today, but although it is a friendly, it's also a very important game for some of England players, such as people like David Seaman, Trevor Steven and Ian Wright, players who are not regulars. In Ian Wright's case, of course, is his debut tonight, and it's a good game to make your debut on, because I think that if he's going to continue his international career, which we all hope he is, he's going to come up against more demanding and better defenders than he is tonight.
Graham Taylor was particularly impressed with Ian Wright's attitude when he played for the B team in Algeria. He said he looked upon it as a player playing in a club reserve side who wasn't going to be content to stay in the reserves. He wanted to get into the first team. But at the moment he's having a little word with Norman Medhurst on the England physiotherapy staff.
Sometimes in the past, you know, we've seen players who have made their debuts and then been discarded after a poor performance. But I think tonight, Ian Wright has got the opportunity to really go and show what a good player he is.
In the referee's mind here will be to judge the conditions as they inevitably deteriorate. Now Omam-Biyik fell heavily. And it's a sad exit for him. Barnes beat him to the ball. And, it's in that fall that Omam-Biyik damaged himself.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that John Barnes wasn't involved at all with the collision there. I think he's probably overstretched and done himself some muscular damage.
Roger Milla down there with the scarf and the duffel coat, checking on the damage. And I think Roger Milla responsible for our information that it's a knee ligament problem. Cameroon getting Libby ready as the replacement. Stephen. That was a header that ricocheted back across goal, and Ian Wright disappointed that it fell a yard or two too close to the goalkeeper when he was in the clear.
Well, the Cameroon defenders in this first half have shown that they're not particularly brilliant at defending. Some of their challenges have been rather poor, and Tato there showed that his heading is not particularly good either in defence.
Oh, and Des Walker miscuing in the air, Mark Wright having to hurry. Lee Dixon's got No direct danger here to deal with. England's next game at the end of next month against the Republic of Ireland, with the European Championship points at stake. And one feels that it will be a very different kind of match, and one hopes in a milder climate. There's a minute left plus stoppage time of the first half, in which England have carried the fight consistently to Cameroon, but haven't built up a substantial advantage for all that. They lead 1-0. Pagal.
Yes, it is rather surprising the scoreline is 1-0. For all their territorial dominance, England haven't really created many chances.
Robson. Stephen, Lineker taking over, and Walker free to his left, but further forward Brian Robson also relatively unmarked. Pearce. Gascoigne. He hooked it on to Lineker when the odds were against him. Fede. Cameroon still waiting to get the substitute on. And here comes Thomas Libby, who can play at the back or in midfield, and did start the game against England in Naples. He's recently moved to play in the Cameroon second division. Yes, they do have a second division, at the club where Roger Milla is the general manager. It's a club with a lot of financial resources. Stephen hurdled that magnificently away from Onana. Pearce. Barnes, his target was Trevor Stephen, who'd stayed onside. Cameroon trying to defend on a line along the edge of the penalty area. Right. Barnes. And Bell, as Brian Robson tried to break through the offside trap. Bell is 36, actually a year older than Nkono. And as I said at the outset, he lost his World Cup starting role on the morning of the match in Milan against Argentina because of public criticism of the then Cameroon coach, the man from the Soviet Union, Omam-Biyik. Libby. There's an offside flag here. Robson. Pearce setting off away on the far side. Stephen and Lineker wheeling ahead of Dixon. Markwright. England have just slackened the tempo. Graham Taylor won't be pleased with that. He does believe that international football can be played at a quicker pace than we often see it. Well, here at Wembley, the weather might be very different from the way it was in Naples on July the 1st last year, which enters its second half, with England leading by the penalty midway through the first. Struck home with great conviction by Gary Lineker. Gascoigne. Lineker. Now Dixon. Immediately Cameroon drop back Omas, Wright, Ian Wright that is, and here's Stephen, Ian Wright's onside. Wasted the position, and from our representatives down on the pitch, we understand it hasn't frozen up at all, and that should last the evening quite comfortably. So Ian Wright really can't put any blame on the conditions there.
I agree with Laurie McMenamin's comments during the half-time interval about Paul Gascoigne. I felt that first half he was playing rather too deep and rather doing too much on the ball. It was noticeable that at times Brian Robson was urging him to go forward to do his best of his work around the penalty box, a little bit nearer to Ian Wright and Gary Lineker.
Barnes, Dixon setting up on the right, Robson into that congested area again, and Ebwele. Fede getting it back to the goalkeeper. Cameroon with a lot of French influence on their football. Some European discipline to go with the African improvisation. But they really haven't given any great indication tonight that they've improved their tackling techniques. They give England another free kick. Gascoigne to take the free kick. Robson, Ian Wright and Lineker making their moves. It bounces off Libby. Bell starts to come and Libby flicks it away to Ebwele. And Fede. Tator. It is dangerous to keep harping back to what happened last summer, but undoubtedly Cameroon were more positive in the second half of most of their games. And they have got the opportunity here with the match still within their reach to make England pay for not getting more goals after dominating the first 45 minutes. Gascoigne showing almost as a front man to receive that pass. Plenty ahead of him now, including Robson. Dixon. And there might be a counter-attack on here for Cameroon. Ekeke. Umbu. They say of him he's got lungs of leather. The amount of work he's able to get through in a game. He's on the ball, not quite now, because Mark Wright got in. But you can't help feeling, Trevor, that Brian Robson has stayed on because England haven't sewn up the game yet.
Well, I didn't think the first half was a particularly demanding first half for Brian. I would think at Manchester United's training grounds he's had more demanding five-a-sides. But I think that he'll probably stay on for 10 or 15 minutes. And looking at the substitutes bench, it wouldn't surprise me if Steve Hodge comes on for the last half an hour. But that's only my opinion.
Graham Taylor's anxious to give Steve Hodge a run in his preferred position, which is more in the centre of midfield. All his 22 caps have been won on the left-hand side. He's not scored a goal for England, which is most unusual for a player who's a regular scorer from midfield for his club. But that is largely because of the role that he was handed to him rather, in his international so far. But I'm sure Hodge will come on, and I just wonder whether we might see Nigel Clough before the evening's out as well, who is the one striker on the bench.
Yes, I would think Nigel Clough coming on is also a possibility. I said before I was surprised that Chris Watto didn't appear on the substitutes bench, but I would think that Graham Taylor knows all about Chris Watto at international level, and the reason he's put Nigel there is because he's going to play him in some part of this game.
Well, it was a terrible pass by Omam-Biyik, and Ebwele very gallantly kept it in. Libby. Umfede. Ebwele again. Dixon cuts it off. Gascoigne. Ekeke. Support from behind comes from Omam-Biyik. Tator. 6 forward for Cameroon. Really the first time we've seen that. Stuart Pearce, who's been known to deck 1 or 2 opponents, finds himself on the ground himself. Put there by Pagal. Dixon. Lineker making good ground ahead of him. Ebwele coming right through the back, and that's a potentially damaging tackle. And John Blankenstein, the Dutch referee, very quickly on the scene. Omam-Biyik. Here's Mbu.
Just referring back to that tackle by Ebwele on Gary Lineker, I thought it was a very bad foul coming in from behind, and I think the referee would stop that if he took a yellow card out.
Well, that was how Cameroon took up a real catalogue of cards in the World Cup. Tackle. Settled in the end, it was a difference between getting past England and not, because they actually have 4 first-choice players suspended from the game in Naples, and there's another late one by Onana on Lineker, and the referee's got to be firmer if this goes off. Stephen and the Dixon to the right, and Kundé able to cut it off. He might be losing a little bit of his speed at the age of 34, but his brain still functioning at international level. Back from Omam-Biyik. England still in a formative phase under the new management. 2 wins here against Hungary in the friendly in September, and Poland in the European Championship, achieved without conceding a goal. Much more demanding a draw for Graham Taylor's carefully selected side in Dublin against Jack Charlton's Republic of Ireland. Delaying at the free kick. And then really giving the ball away. Looking for Libby, but Ian Wright had seen that coming a long time earlier. Eventually Mbu has to play it back to the goalkeeper. Onana. Robson. Barnes infield, leaving space for Pearce. Everyone far one back for Cameroon. And left Ekeke the furthest forward. Robson. We've had 10 minutes into the second half. Hodge still doing its stretches. England still leading by 1-0.
crowd puller, but he hasn't really been the string puller for England in a match that's difficult against opponents who are very rarely coming out of their shell. And England needing the second goal, not to ensure victory, but for just a psychological lift here and to flatten the morale of opponents who are showing again that they're no pushovers whatever the circumstances. Pierce has gone across to whip this in with the left foot. Mark Wright. And Barnes got to it before Mark Wright. Pierce, the linesman says play on. But Wembley had recovered. Wembley, who had to get extra leave from the bank that he works at to stay with the squad during the World Cup. That was happily given in a country that was so overjoyed. Football is everything in Cameroon. A huge boost in the sales of television last June and July. Often in the out-of-town areas where there's no electricity, run-off generators, and watch the hundreds huddling around television sets. Gascoigne, not quite the range. He looks for Trevor Stephen. And not quite the rhythm, Trevor Francis, for England.
No, I feel that part of England's problem at the moment is that probably the two most talented, gifted players, technically, are John Barnes and Paul Gascoigne. And unfortunately, John is having one of his evenings that we've come accustomed to with England, where he doesn't get into the game. Paul Gascoigne's getting plenty of the ball, but every time he gets it, he keeps giving it to a green shirt.
Platt. Omam-Biyik, and now Pagal. And England have no room for error at the back. Good to see the players still able to keep their balance well and change direction sharply. Keke. Matched all the way by the speed of Des Walker, playing his 27th consecutive international for England tonight. Very much the automatic choice at the moment. Stephen trying to get back to that category of player. Oh, the linesman started the flag and then brought the flag down. Now points for the England throw.
Yes, I think the linesman realised that Lee Dixon wasn't interfering with play. He was flagging for Ian Wright, who was in offside position. But that was good play for the linesman.
Ian Wright. Came over Barnes. Lineker couldn't quite master the bounce. And Cameroon trying to put their passes together on the break. Omam-Biyik through the legs of Walker, and Robson certainly not short on stamina.
That was good play from Brian Robson there, because he spotted the Kiki making a good run through the middle of the field. He followed him, didn't allow him to get away from him, and then played an easy ball back to David Seaman.
Gascoigne. A time when football and the authorities are trying to take the spectator more and more into account. It's a terrific attendance here tonight to show that the spectator deserves the consideration. More than 60,000 have come to Wembley. Shivering, I'm sure, many of them, but wondering whether England can make absolutely sure of their success with a second goal. Well, that's great statistic. And it shows the imagination really of picking this fixture when February matches at Wembley aren't always attended with the fervour in the warmer months. Dances in the middle, Lineker on the ball. Oh, and that's tackle facing his own goal, but happily for Cameroon's captain not finding it. And England have a corner and a chance to sustain some pressure. Right, makes his way into the goal area. And they look to Lineker again. Lineker with that sixth sense, and don't Cameroon know all about him? He beat Ian Wright to it. If the delivery is right from the corner, it's impossible to stop that near post flick on. Mark Wright is so good with it, and there were three players at the back post, Ian Wright, Brian Robson and Gary Lineker, all queuing up to put the touch into the net. I've been wondering about the wisdom of putting Stuart Pearce over to take the corner, but it was quite obvious why, because he plays a wicked in-swinging ball, and it's so difficult for the defenders to deal with. Ian Wright must have been just a whisker away of getting the crucial touch for a goal on his England debut. But Gary Lineker, who's got Bobby Charlton's record of 49 goals well and truly in his sights, and if there's any doubt, Lineker's going to get it, I'm sure. And certainly all the congratulations went straight to the number 10. For Cameroon. Omam-Biyik. And it is a Cameroon corner. As I said earlier, they had scheduled the rehearsal for these routines for this morning. They cancelled that when they saw the snow falling. And the lack of practice perhaps evident there. Onana. Pagao. And Pearce has given England a bit of depth there when they needed it. Still just over 25 minutes to go and a chance for the margin of victory to be more emphatic.
There you see the flick on there from Mark Wright. There's absolutely nothing the defenders can do about it. It's Gary Lineker coming in, really his best in the 6-yard box. I'm sure there are many people wondering why Stuart Pearce goes over to take the corner from that side, but he does take a good in-swinging corner. We have players like John Barnes and Trevor Stephen who are quite capable of taking them, but Pearce, as he's shown so often for Nottingham Forest, with that left foot, he's quite devastating and very, very accurate.
Libby. Who's done little more than just lay the ball back to the midfield players. He's had very little option. Graham Taylor held up his hand to suggest he was going to give England 5 minutes after the goal before making his change. He's just about to effect the substitution. Hodge and Pallister. Pallister's ready. There's going to be a double change, but it's the number 8 board that's being held up, and Steve Hodge is going to take over from Gascoigne, which is certainly not the way Graham Taylor was looking at the match beforehand. Maybe it's an indication of how he feels Gascoigne has performed, and possibly not to instructions. Dropped in Dublin, substituted here against Cameroon. But it gives Steve Hodge a chance, away from the restrictions of the left-hand touchline, to try and show he can do an international job in the middle of midfield. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing from over on the far side, that Gary Pallister forgot to put on his England shirt, and that's why he hasn't been able to come on straight away. I would have thought if you get anywhere near an England shirt, the first thing you do is put it on.
Well, that's right, Martin. We're up in the commentary boxes. We've got England shirts on just in case.
Well, you do have one or two, Trevor.
I was looking at the reaction of Paul Gascoigne as he was pulled off, and he was shaking his head in disappointment. I'm sure he was disappointed being pulled off, but I think he knows it in himself that he's had a poor evening tonight. It's not the Paul Gascoigne that we've come to see this season, playing so well for Spurs and for England.
And now Gary Pallister is fully kitted out. Here comes Cameroon. 2 goals down, 2 goals for Lineker, just as it was against them back in July.
Martin, I presume that with Brian Robson coming off and Gary Pallister going into the back, Graham Taylor is going to play the last 25 half an hour with a back 4, or back 5 I should say, playing with 3 central defenders and the 2 full-backs pushed on. Well, this will be revealed in the next couple of minutes.
Here's Walker. Robson. Right ahead of him, and Pierce. Only Lineker at the centre at the moment. Right, who always seems to do everything at top pace, and of course it doesn't always come off. Such a learning process, international football. I remember Kevin Keegan having a slow start to his international career, and we all know what happened when he got a dozen or so games under his belt. He became a major influence in world football. Never easy to fit in smugly straight away. Ian Wright has applied himself, showed that everything hit forward from the back, and possibly will feel that England haven't quite played to his strengths by releasing the ball quickly from deeper positions.
Yes, Ian Wright is certainly a very game boy. He's not stopped running all night. But I think there are times when he could just perhaps just slow down a little bit and just concentrate on keeping the ball in his possession. I once remember Johan Cruyff saying to me when I first started playing, learn to walk.
A bit of a name drop for Trevor, really. But then I say to my friends, I work with Trevor Francis and Andy Gray, so we all fall into that trap.
I think what he was meaning was there's no need to run all the time. There are times when you just stand and have the ball to your feet.
So the captain's armband goes from Robson. Gary Lineker knows how to put it on. So he does captain England tonight. Robson going off, in fact, 19 minutes in time. As I said earlier, it's a gesture from England to Manchester United with so many important games for Robson's club coming up. It is a Manchester United replacement, Gary Pallister, who wins his third cap tonight and his first for more than 2 years, so perhaps he had forgotten how to put on an England shirt. Kundé. Hodge up to fine ball. Right, can he set himself up? Not quite. Kundé. England leading by 2 goals to 0. And the scorer wondering whether he'd perhaps got caught offside then. Gary Pallister has gone into a back line as Trevor Francis anticipated. Ryan Robson is one appearance nearer 100 caps, still another 12 to go. But I think it's fair to say it looked tonight as though he'd never been away. Here's Pallister. Well controlled by Kundé. Gallen is off to trouble momentarily. We're watching this friendly international live on the Sports Channel in conjunction with Guinness. Here's Steve Hodge. And he had to come quickly then. There was confusion in front of him. Ian Wright was bearing down quickly.
Well, considering just how cold it is tonight, I think the Cameroon must be complimented on how well they've stuck to their task. They haven't really threatened to score a goal, but they've never stopped trying. We spoke about how cold it is. I honestly believe that Eskimos will find it cold tonight.
I can't remember a night such as this at Wembley. There was one back in '78 when we played Czechoslovakia here on a frost-bound surface, certainly below freezing. This seems much worse than that, and here's Lineker. Hodge, is that another penalty? No. But Steve Hodge into the sort of scoring position that Graham Taylor will want to see from him in the time that remains. Does Steve Hodge have an international career in this role? It's one of the questions that it won't be totally answered tonight, but Hodge can advance his cause. Barnes, well hit, well by Bell. He's undoubtedly been Cameroon's star turn, the goalkeeper.
Yes, it was a good save. He's held it well, but that's what we want to see more from John Barnes. Coming in onto his favoured left foot, hitting the ball with good power.
Safor. Libby. From Boo to the left, and Alistair quickly out to hold up on Fede for a moment. Ebrele. Even further forward down the left-hand side if England can switch the play. On the right. And, John Blankenstein has given Cameroon the benefit of the doubt as to whether the tackles are simply mistimed or genuinely cynical. And although the pitch has played superbly in the circumstances, it's got to be a heavier fall at this time of night than it was in the early minutes of the match.
Just a right smile there at Onana after he fouled Lee Dixon. He was complaining about it. It makes you wonder if they actually know when they do commit a foul.
Stuart Pearce, whose ability at set pieces has set up one goal. He's trying to jam at the free kick. Barnes and went on through to the goalkeeper. To wonder what sort of effect this weather's going to have on the league programme at the weekend. Cameroon are going to take off Ekeke, who hasn't been able to score tonight as he did in such thrilling style against England in Naples. And it's one of the new generation coming on, Guy Sapoko for Cameroon, the only member of the 18-man party here who didn't go to the World Cup. Kundé in a tight corner. And he's done very well to earn a throw. As I said before, it's almost certain to be his last international. Ten minutes left of it. England looking for a third goal to make the night complete really for their supporters. And they might have a chance at the corner conceded by Pagal with a weary attempt at the back pass. This time Mark Wright sending Pallister towards the near post. Trevor Stephen to try and supply the service. Pallister got to it and Bell was in danger of carrying it over the line. I think he would have been propelled by on England's shoulder or two if that had been the case.
Once again we saw the in-swinging corner, this time from Trevor Stephen, but unfortunately on this occasion Gary Pallister gets too much of a touch on and the keeper takes the ball not comfortably but without too many problems. I think the referee was there to protect him anyway.
Hit it long from the back. Kundé is reading the play well enough for Cameroon. Trevor, I hope not too deep a point, but the natural way international football seems to be played these days is keeping possession. This is around the world. Jack Charlton has changed it a little bit. Graham Taylor perhaps is trying to get to something not exactly along the same lines, but a more direct style. But is it that difficult to get players to change their habits? Can they respond to instruction as easily?
Well, I feel it's essential at international level to keep possession, but I just feel at times tonight, England, especially in the first half, they were too ponderous. The build-up was far too slow. You can still keep possession, but by moving the ball quickly, making quick movements off the ball. England were just walking around, and it was too easy there for the Cameroon defenders to mark. The modern day game, you have to be very, very fit, and obviously all these England players tonight are fit, but you've got to play it at pace, and at times we haven't played the ball quickly enough.
Barnes, a rare spot of defending for England to do. Onana, maybe more to do here as Libby keeps his balance on the ball. Sator. Libby left it, he thought, to a teammate. Wasn't the case. Here's Ian Wright. 6. Again, Cameroon have flooded back to defend their own penalty area, and they'll now have to do it at the expense of another corner. We've spoken about the shortcomings in free play. England do look very dangerous at their set pieces. Oh, and it was Dixon who couldn't keep it down, as Cameroon were struggling to deal with a varied approach from a corner that time.
Well, here we see a different variety from the corner kick. It was played short. You see Lee Dixon there unluckily hitting the ball over the crossbar. But you said this morning, Martin, that the Cameroon didn't have time to, they didn't have time, but it was too cold for them to practice their set pieces. I don't think they've done too much homework either on England's set pieces, because they've been found wanting tonight on every corner kick.
Goes Tapoko. 5 minutes to go. A goal in each half. The first from the penalty spot. Both from Gary Lineker. Libby. Here's Tapoko. Inside. Finding Dixon just a little too quick on the turn. Corner, and the goalkeeper Antoine Bell trying to restrain himself from going up for it. He's gone back into his own penalty area now, but he was well upfield as Cameroon attacked there. Kundé. Pagal on the right, but Pearce given absolutely no problem, giving Seaman almost some serious work. Stephen. Becoming a familiar tale that we've been bringing you in England matches at Wembley this season of Gary Lineker getting the goals for Graham Taylor. He's scored in all the 3 matches here under the new manager. But it's Lee Dixon looking for England's third, and there's an offside against Lineker in fact. Coverage from Wembley tonight in conjunction with Guinness. And I do think perhaps the most memorable feature when we look back in years to come on this February night is that the game has been staged at all, and staged certainly in playable conditions throughout. Wembley has its share of criticism, but it deserves credit for getting this match on. Right. No foul. Stephen. However, it's a hard performance to evaluate really from the England point of view.
Yes, I think that 1 or 2 players have certainly enhanced their international prospects, none more so than Trevor Stephen. He's played tonight as if he's never been away from the scene. It's not easy when you've been out for so long, but he's come back tonight, played with great confidence, and I've been very impressed with him.
Pearce. Cameroon have stuck to their policy. It's not really brought them a shot in anger, let alone a real feeling that they were going to put a goal past England. And John Barnes tries to give us just one lasting warm memory amidst the cold here. Pearce dodges in the middle, and that might be the last England flurry as the snow reappears in this part of northwest London, and the spectators are starting to wonder, and perhaps with a little concern about how difficult their journeys home are going to be.
Yes, that was more like John Barnes. They're feeding 2 or 3 players in a close dribble and then providing Stuart Pearce with the ball in an attacking area, but I would like to see the roles reversed. I would like to see Stuart Pearce feeding John Barnes in a more advanced position.
And it's Barnes who crosses here, and Lineker kept going after them and showed that he believed Bell had misjudged it. It was a very deep cross.
Yes, these are the areas that I want to see John Barnes playing. He gets in a good long cross, just a little bit too long, but I'd much sooner see him in those areas than Stuart Pearce. Stuart Pearce is a good defender. John Barnes must be advised at all times to get forward, because that's where he does his best work.
Well, reputation at stake tonight rather than World Cup progress of 7 months ago. The elements as much a test as the opposition, but Gary Lineker comes up smiling once more, whatever the circumstances. 2 more goals for the England